this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the story of Carol Chase McElhenney. One day in 2006, Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would just be better off continuing on her trip and left Riverside. Carol didn't end up returning to Riverside until a few years later, after her dad had passed and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that day that she ended up in some sort of parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there. In our number 9 spot, we have this story from Peru. The Marcohuesi forest in Peru has been called a doorway to another dimension for centuries because of all the stone figures that resemble human faces and religious figures, and because of the amount of people who go missing and never get found. There was a group of friends who decided to enter the forest despite all of these stories, and they ended up stumbling upon a cabin that appeared to have some sort of party going on inside. As the group went up to the cabin, they saw people inside, but all of the people were in 17th century garb, and nothing that was modern or similar to what the group of friends was wearing. One of the friends began to try and enter the cabin and was halfway in the door when the friends quickly pulled her back. After being pulled out, it was discovered that the half of her body that had entered the cabin was now paralyzed. If her body really did become paralyzed because it had entered another dimension, that would definitely explain all of those strange stone statues. In our number 8 spot, we have the old story of the Green Children of Woolpit. In the 12th century, it is said that 2 children were discovered just outside of Woolpit, Great Britain, but what was so weird about them is that they had green skin. When the children were brought back into the city and given food and water, they refused to eat anything other than raw beans. Eventually, their green skin began to fade and turned into a more normal human color. One of the children passed away, but the girl continued to grow and eventually learned English. When she was finally able to communicate with those around her, she told the story of how her and her brother had come from a place that was in constant darkness called St. Martin's Land. Everyone from her town lived underground, and everyone had the same green skin. The girl and her brother were wandering around one day when they came across a cave, and they decided to enter. They kept walking and eventually came to Woolpit, and when they turned around, the cave they had been in disappeared. Did this cave act as a portal to an alternate reality for these kids? If so, I don't ever want to end up where they come from because it does not sound nice. Guys, before I continue on in this list, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. In our number 7 spot today, we have the story of James Richards. In 2009, James was walking his dog when he tripped and knocked his head, rendering him unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself beside some sort of machine he didn't recognize, and there was another man named Jonas who said he had just found James' body while he was on a work trip for the interdimensional travel company that he worked for. What? The two ended up striking up some sort of conversation, I guess like you would when someone just casually tells you that they travel through dimensions for work. They started chatting about what pop culture was like in each of their dimensions, and they came to discover that, of course, the Beatles existed in both of their dimensions. Jonas ended up explaining that in his dimension, the Beatles were all still alive and they had never actually broken up. Jonas gave James a cassette tape of the Beatles music from his dimension that certainly does not exist in ours. When James returned to our universe, he ended up uploading the tape to a website called thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. In our number 6 spot, we have a story from Reddit that was posted by the user 2humfolk. One day, the writer was driving home from school and began trying to call their boyfriend using the hands-free feature. The phone didn't end up ringing even after 5 separate attempts, so they turned the phone off and then on again and tried one more time. This time the boyfriend answered, but it didn't really sound like the person they knew and loved, and they also sounded like they were pretty freaked out. He said, "Liz, is this you?" Liz kept saying hello, but wasn't getting an answer, and panicked and hung up the phone. Liz tried calling again twice, but there was no ring again. Luckily, on the 3rd try, another voice picked up the phone and asked, "Is this better?" Liz then asked who this was, and the voice responded with something unintelligible, and then they hung up. Liz continued to call the boyfriend until he picked up the phone. Sounding significantly more like himself and not panicked at all, Liz asked who was picking up the phone earlier, and the boyfriend explained that no one had picked up the phone because he had never received any other calls. When Liz got home and checked the boyfriend's call log, they realized that only one call had gone through to his phone. Liz made sure that they were dialing the right number when they were calling, and it was the correct number every single time. Who had been answering the boyfriend's phone? At our number 5 spot and halfway mark, we have another Reddit post from Tiger King Quentin. The user explains that this story takes place when they were 8 years old in Florida with their family and their friend's family for a 2-week vacation. The friend really wanted to go to Wet n Wild and begged for his parents to take them there, so they ended up going one day during the trip. The boy and his dad ended up going into the wave pool that day and were mainly staying in the shallow area. After a while, a larger wave comes their way and it takes the boy underneath the water. He realizes he can't feel the bottom anymore and begins to panic, trying to break the surface of the water. When he reaches the top and gets his head out of the water, he realizes that he is no longer at Wet n Wild, but is in the middle of an ocean a couple hundred meters from an island. He doesn't know where or what this island is, but after a few seconds he begins to feel lightheaded and sinks back into the water. Luckily, he then feels some hands under his arms and he realizes his dad is lifting him out of the water back at Wet n Wild, asking him if he's alright. Maybe this wave pool really did take this kid to an alternate dimension. In our number 4 spot, we have a story coming from Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, a plane from Europe landed and dropped off its passengers. As the passengers made their way through customs, one man told the officials that he was just on a normal business trip that he made regularly. He spoke French as his first language, but could also speak Japanese and a few other languages. Officials then asked him where he was from, and his response is where things take a turn. He said he was from a place called Taured, which was on the border between France and Spain. When officials told him that the place didn't exist, he gave them a passport that had been issued by this country that isn't real. This passport had also been stamped, validating all of the previous trips he had said he went on, including his previous trips to Japan. Officials called the company that he said he was meeting with, and the company said that they had never heard of him or his company before. They then called the hotel he said he had a reservation at, and the bank that was listed on his checkbook. The hotel said that there was no reservation for him, and the bank just didn't exist at all. Officials thought that maybe he was confused, so they showed him a map and pointed to the country of Andorra, asking him if this is what he meant. The man began to get upset, saying that Andorra didn't exist and that it had misplaced Taured where he claimed to be from. Customs decided to detain the man and put him in a hotel room for the night while they decided what to do next. The next day when they went to collect the man, he had totally disappeared with all of his personal identification and documents. Police searched for this missing man, but he was never found. Maybe this man somehow accidentally found himself in a parallel universe separate from his own, and I just hope he was able to make it back to wherever he was from and return to his normal life. In our number 3 spot, we have the story of a man named Jafar Vorin. Jafar was a strange man who just appeared in a village one day before he was picked up by authorities. The language he spoke was closest to German, but even then it wasn't quite the same. Jafar said he was from a place called Sakria and that he was searching for his brother who had been lost in a shipwreck. He couldn't point out where he was from, but was able to tell authorities some geographical information about where he had come from. He explained that his home had 5 separate compartments, or continents, called Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, and Uplar. He couldn't show anyone how he had arrived at the village, and he had no idea how to get home, so he just ended up living out the rest of his life in Berlin. It's crazy to think that maybe he was a man from another dimension and he ended up just getting stuck here. I feel bad for him, and I wish we could have helped him return home. In our number 2 spot, we have the story of Pedro Ramirez. Pedro was driving from a place called Seville to his home in Alcalá de Guadalajara on a November night in 1986. As he went around a curve in the road, he suddenly found himself on a 6-lane highway, and as he continued to drive straight, he saw tall buildings, unidentified structures, and grass that was 2 feet tall growing alongside the road. These were all things that were out of the ordinary for that area. He continued driving, and suddenly Pedro heard a voice that told him he had been transferred to another country in a different hemisphere. Pedro didn't know what to do, so he kept driving for another hour before stopping on the side of the road to take a look around. After a short break, he began driving again, only to come across a sign with 3 arrows pointing in different directions. One was labeled Malaga, the other was Sevilla, and the last was Alcabala. Pedro decided to take the Sevilla route, and after driving down it for a while, he stopped again. When he pulled over and got out of the car, he stood there for a second, and then when he looked back to his left, he saw he was standing right outside of his home. He tried to go back to where he had been before, but couldn't find anything that he had seen before, including the sign with the 3 arrows. Who knows where Pedro was for that while, but I'm very glad that he ended up making it home safely. In our number 1 spot today, we have the story of Lorena Garcia. One morning in 2008, Lorena woke up in a life that was similar to the one she was living when she went to sleep, but certainly not the same. At first it was just small things like her bed sheets and her pajamas, but when she got to work, things began to escalate. Lorena realized that her office wasn't her office, and that she worked in the same building, but in a completely different department. She had never even met her boss before, so she knew that this couldn't have been a moment where she just got lost or confused. When she returned home after work that day, she was met by her ex-boyfriend, only to find out that he was apparently her current boyfriend. She tried to find the person that she had been dating for months, but he didn't seem to exist in this new life and world that she found herself in. Lorena began to seek psychiatric help because she was fearing that she was having some sort of nervous breakdown, but all tests revealed that she seemed to be of sound body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery and wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with a medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I kind of believe Lorena too.
Do parallel universes really exist? Well, people certainly have some interesting stories to share, so today I'll be telling some parallel universe stories posted to Reddit.
Hello, we are not available now.
And we're starting things off with a very eerie story posted to Reddit by Flarengo, who writes, "This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, 'Hey, it's me. Sorry, I missed you. Call you later. Bye.' And then I hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he called back and he says, 'Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who is that girl you were talking to?' And I was like, 'What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl.' Well, as it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave, as quoted above, there was a slight pause and it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I didn't recognize. You can compare it to the message I know I did leave, and the two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but, talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that recorded the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and analyzed, unfortunately. Also, neither I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky. I can't explain it. This next post was by Ninix Time, who writes about a time he may have seen parallel universe versions of his own family. The story goes like this. Around the age of 11, my family decided to go and visit my grandparents, and while we were there, I decided to go out and play around for a bit. They lived in a flat in the middle of the city. They had a road that had stores and a car park on the right, and had enough space for me to play around with my friends that lived there. As I got down and ran to that car park, a car went past that nearly crashed into me, and in that car, there were 3 passengers. A woman, her daughter, and a male driver. As I dodged that car, they looked like they had no emotions whatsoever and looked really dull. And as I focused into the car, the male driver was my dad. Very easily distinctive. And the car was our car. Same color, same car plates, same everything. I instantly ran to our car, thinking it had been stolen, but our car was sitting right there. I turned around to follow the car that nearly hit me, but it was no longer there. I ran upstairs to my grandparents' house without knowing what to do or what to say. Luckily, my sister was right by the door, and I told her the story and what I saw. She just laughed, telling me that my dad hadn't left the house yet. Next up, we have a post with the heading, Sudden and Short Shift into Parallel Universe by BB Shuri, which goes as follows. I was very much in love with a guy, and one day we were hanging out in his car, just chilling. He was telling me a story about his nephew who had a schizophrenic episode or something, and I was just listening, totally into the story, when suddenly I found myself sitting in a different car with him. This specific car was an old timer, and I had a wedding dress on. He had on a tuxedo. I remember feeling so happy and elevated, and he was a little bit grumpy because we were waiting for someone and there was this time pressure. We had to be at the venue. The scene lasted maybe 5 seconds, but everything was so real. I could feel the air, the atmosphere. I could feel my wedding dress, the temperature, the emotions, everything. I remember looking outside the window and seeing that we were parked beside a building, and the person we were waiting for was in the building. The building was on a hill, surrounded by nature. In a snap, I was back in the regular car with him, right at the moment he was finishing his story. I have no idea what he told me. At the time, I didn't know what the frig just happened, but now I can maybe see it as a glitch into a parallel universe where we did get married. Next Reddit user is NYZ312, who discusses a very strange incident when they may have died and shown up in another timeline. They write, I've never really discussed this with anyone, but thought this may be the place to at least see what you think. I was driving down a street that is somewhat busy, 4 lanes, 2 each way, and there was a light rain. I came to a light that I wanted to turn left, across traffic. There's no dedicated turning lane. I waited till I thought it was clear, but just as I turned left, someone came around the inner opposite lane and I could see we were going to collide. I closed my eyes. The next thing I knew, I was on the street I intended to turn on, 2 blocks up on the side of the street, just sitting there, no collision. I gathered myself and went on, but I think about it a lot. My scar is on the wrong side, posted by Charming Medium. This will sound weird, but I had to share this, so I'll explain. When I was very young, I was diagnosed with leukemia. I'm now cancer-free, thankfully, but back then I had a port cath installed. It was on my left side. It was always on my left side. Once it was removed, I had a scar on my left side. I don't know how or when, but the scar is now on my right side. I can't even begin to explain how. About 3 years ago, I remember looking at my left side and being unable to find it. I looked around to see where it may have moved, but I couldn't find it. I eventually forgot about it, and sometime last year when I got out of the shower, I noticed it. It was on my right side. I asked my grandmother about it. I asked what side my port was on. As expected, she said it was my left, and she was just as confused as I was about it being on my right side. It still bothers me, and I think about it sometimes. It makes me uneasy in a way I can't explain. I always joked about the whole glitch in the Matrix stuff, the Mandela effect and everything. I don't know what to think anymore. Posted to Reddit by Balthazar, she writes about a disturbing incident she had in class that led to a series of disturbing dreams. It started around the time I had just gotten into high school. So around the time I was about 12 to 13, I guess. It was register period on the first day back after school holidays. We all wait for our names to be read and each of us reply. The teacher reads out a name and nobody answers. Out of nowhere, I get this feeling like someone just ripped my stomach out and replaced it with ice cubes. I find it odd, but I can't shake the feeling. Anyway, about 5 minutes later, another new student enters the class and my jaw almost drops. Except for having red hair, she could have been my twin. The teacher sits her near me and I can't stop staring. She notices me and looks just as astonished. We begin a conversation, but the uneasy feeling stays with me. About 10 minutes later, the principal walks into the classroom, and I freeze and clutch the desk. Here it comes. The teacher notices and walks over to the principal. They lean in together and he whispers something to her. She nods and he steps forward facing class. "I'm sorry, class, but Miss X," the girl not present at register that morning, "has passed away over the holidays. She took her own life." I tuned out for the rest of what she said and just started crying uncontrollably, and that set off the rest of the class. The dreams started after this. I cannot say why, as I don't know. To go into each and every specific dream would be insanity. It's very detailed. Let's just say when people I have had contact with, no matter how briefly in life, are about to die, I dream their deaths about 3 days beforehand. I will simply state that it is not possible to be mere coincidence based on how many people's deaths I have dreamt. 2 colleagues I have worked with, 3 grandparents, 1 great-grandfather, 1 friend's grandfather, 2 school teachers, 1 lady I met briefly for 5 minutes one day at work, at least 3 friends, all dead within 3 days of my dreams. Make of it what you will. This next post is called "I May Have Saved My Dad in Another Universe." It was posted by Karina Nebula 89, and it reads, "My dad died a year ago, and a few months later, I had a dream that felt as real as reality, being wide awake. He was alive in that dream, and I was very confused about that. I remembered the police report I read. He died in his apartment, luckily, seemingly in his sleep, and the police had to break in. He lived in a social house building in which they checked the tenants daily, and when he didn't open the door, they called the police. I remembered the time of death on the police report, and in that dream, that time of date had not happened yet. Another reason why this dream felt so real. I could see dates and everything on my phone clearly. Everything was logical, and time passed normally, like it would while being awake. But the time was approaching. I made a plan to get him to the hospital, but he was taking his sweet time getting ready, and I was getting anxious because I knew the time of death was soon, but he did not really get why I was getting so serious about leaving. Eventually I checked my phone again, and the time was right after the time of death on the police report, and my dad was still alive and well. I was baffled. He still went to the hospital, but while he was on the way there, I woke up. This next post is from Witty Turnover 5585 and reads, "So I'm scrolling YouTube a little bit ago and see a video titled The 11-Day Disappearance of Agatha Christie, and I thought it was a mistake, so I watched the video and a few others to see, sure enough, she was only missing for 11 days. But I vividly remember my favorite show growing up, Unsolved Mysteries, having an episode about her disappearance. And in this episode, she kisses her daughter, walks out the back door, and vanishes, never to be seen again. I thought at the time it was weird because I'd learned about her in school and had to do a book report at one time. So I searched for this particular episode, and there is one of her, but again, she was only gone for 11 days. I think I skipped universes at some point because that's not the history where I'm from. Anyone else have something similar happen? Next up, we have a post by NAOIYII. Don't know how to pronounce that. It's entitled, My Maybe Experience in a Different Universe. It was in the middle of the night and I had just woke up. I don't know why I woke up, but I was up. I felt weird. I felt like it was super quiet, like too quiet. I know it was the middle of the night, but it was weird. I felt like everything was down in scale, like my room was smaller, my bed was smaller, and everything was. I was so confused. It was also pitch black outside, like no lights at all. It was weird, and I started crying and ran to my mom's room. My mom was looking at me weird, and she asks me, what's wrong? I told her, I don't know where I am, with a crying tone, and she just looked at me like I'm crazy. She told me I can lay with her if I want. I was 11 at the time, and I won't forget it. I swear everything was too quiet and dark. When I woke up, I felt completely normal, and it seemed like nothing had happened. My mom also, for some reason, didn't even know I went into her room that night. But maybe she was just too tired to remember. And finally, we have a Reddit post by EqualStance99 entitled, Shirt Suddenly Went Missing and Then Appeared a Few Days Later. Hi, I've had a few encounters throughout my life that are mostly explainable using logic. However, I cannot find any explanation to this experience. I took some pants and shirt out of my cupboard and put them on my bed to get dressed. I turned around, closed the cupboard, but when I turned back around to get dressed, the shirt was just missing. I searched everywhere, but I just couldn't find it. Yesterday, the shirt appeared back in my cupboard, neatly folded, as if I had never touched it. I am positive that I didn't miss it, because upon its return, it was on the top of all my shirts, and no other one is that color. I am beyond bewildered at this simple yet unexplainable occurrence. Any of you have any kind of weird experiences with parallel universes or Mandela effects? Let us know down in the comments.
Starting off this list at number 10. This story goes that a couple were at home just doing some household chores when something super strange happened to them. The husband went to open the front door to toss a dirty rug out of the house, and it was completely pitch black outside. The weird part is that it was 2 p.m. and from inside the house it looked like a regular sunny afternoon with light coming in from the windows. They said that suddenly outside the front door where it was dark, it's like the sun was a light bulb and it went on, then off again, and then on. They described it like the flickering a light bulb does right before it's burnt out. The wife asked the husband if he had seen that, and he replied, yes, what just happened? They also said that there weren't any clouds out either, so it couldn't have been a cloud blocking the sky. Were they transported to some alternate reality for a second? I honestly have no explanation for what the pair witnessed. Moving on to number 9. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. This story comes from a Reddit user called RunnerGirl2001. RunnerGirl was trying to get over an ex when their friend Maggie texted asking if they would be open to going on a date with a mutual friend named Audrey. RunnerGirl accepted and tried to talk with Audrey, but didn't really feel a strong connection and felt like maybe they just weren't meant to be. Shortly after this, more friends began texting RunnerGirl about Audrey, even though they didn't really want to keep seeing her. Later that day, RunnerGirl ended up zoning out in light traffic and was close to getting in a car accident. They were halfway into the intersection when they realized that they had run a red light, and at the moment they realized they saw a car swerve to not hit them. RunnerGirl pulled over after this to process what just happened, and after this specific moment, RunnerGirl's friends never mentioned Audrey again. A few months later, Audrey began dating someone else in the friend group named Jake, so RunnerGirl assumed that this was why they stopped bringing up Audrey. A few months later, RunnerGirl ended up bringing up Audrey to Maggie and brings up how Maggie had tried to set them up. Maggie was super confused for saying, no, we were trying to set Audrey up with Jake. When RunnerGirl went back to their text messages, they couldn't find any that mentioned Audrey at all. In the near-miss car accident, did RunnerGirl somehow end up jumping into another dimension? Moving on to number 8. One day a person, let's call them Taylor, was watching TV with their mom and brother while their sister and dad went out to run some errands. While they were watching TV, an ad for a show comes on the screen, and it was one of those veterinary shows. Taylor's brother immediately recognized the vet on screen as his old track and field coach. The brother knew that he was a vet, but didn't know that he was now on a TV show. Taylor had never met the coach before, but obviously thought this story was cool. Later, when Taylor's dad and sister returned home, Taylor went to tell their sister about the TV show mishap. Taylor's sister had also never met this track coach, and Taylor begins to tell the story and asks if she remembers the old coach who had a vet clinic. Taylor's sister replies, "The funny one with the mustache?" Taylor is confused since she's never met him, so asks how she would know he had a funny mustache. Taylor's sister replies and says that Taylor told her about the coach earlier that morning. This of course totally freaked Taylor out because they didn't know what the coach looked like that morning, and also they definitely do not remember having this conversation because why would anyone bring up their brother's old track coach without a reason? I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but something weird is definitely going on. Moving on to number 7. This story comes from a person who often commutes to a town around 3 hours away from the one that they live in. One day they were doing the 3-hour drive with their mom, and they got to this part that takes most of the drive, and it's an area with a lot of mountains and cliffs. They are in the passenger seat with their mom driving, and as they look out the side of the window over one of the cliffs, they see a small community that they had never seen before. This community looked nice and consisted of mostly bungalows, which is apparently not normal for the area. Both them and their mom were super confused as to how they had never seen this community before, but it gets even weirder. They never saw the community again. It just disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Did they accidentally drive into another dimension one day? Moving on to number 6. So one day, this person was driving to work on the same route that they took every single day. They worked the whole day through and got into their car to head back home on that same path. As they were driving, they started feeling super anxious and like on the verge of a panic attack. They kept driving, and then suddenly they see this huge power plant all lit up. They're super confused because they drive this road every single day. How could they possibly miss this glaringly obvious thing? Then their boyfriend calls and asks them to pick up McDonald's on the way home. No problem, they go to the drive-thru. When they get to the window, they see an employee that they've never seen before, even though they're at the same McDonald's almost every single day because you've got to get those chicken nuggets. And this new employee is the only one there and says that they've been working there for around 2 months. They take the food and head home, and when they get there, they begin to tell the boyfriend about this strange power plant that they just saw. The boyfriend explains that the power plant has always been there, so he doesn't know what they're talking about. Now every day they drive past this power plant with no idea how it got there or how they had missed it, but they've also noticed a few other small differences in their life. Their dog doesn't know tricks it used to know, and their boyfriend pronounces some words differently than before. Maybe on their drive home they slipped into a new dimension. Moving on to number 5. This story starts when a person received a camera as an early birthday gift, but there was no SD card in the camera. When they got home, they threw an older SD card into the camera and began to see old pictures and videos that they had totally forgotten about. As they were scrolling through the pictures, they realized that one was a video of their mom with one of their old dogs who had passed away. This was obviously such a treat to see this video that they forgot even existed, and to be able to see their dog once again. They switched to another SD card to see if there were any more hidden gems that they had forgotten about, but unfortunately the other SD card didn't really contain much. When they switched back to the original SD card, they saw the thumbnail for the video with the dog. They selected it, but when it went to load, the screen just suddenly looked like it was cracked all over. They backed out of the thumbnail, and then the entire video just completely disappeared, as well as the fact that now the brand new camera screen was just all messed up. While looking through SD cards, did the camera somehow transport them into an alternate reality where that video was taken? I don't know. This whole situation is super weird. Moving on to number 4. This story comes from a person who works at a retirement home, so they have to get a weekly COVID test. The test takes place in a building farthest from the building that they actually work in, so they drove their car over to the test, parked their car on the lot, but left it running since the test was routine and super quick and easy. At the test, they saw a friend of theirs and offered them a ride back to the building that they worked in. The pair headed out to the lot and realized that their car was still running, but the doors were locked. They searched their pockets to make sure that they didn't have a key, but since the car was still running, this obviously wasn't possible, and there was no spare key for the car, so they ended up calling a locksmith to come and help them out. The pair waited inside the testing building until the locksmith arrived. When he got there, they went out to the car and realized it wasn't running anymore. They thought maybe it had run out of gas, or maybe the battery had died, but they felt like it hadn't been that long. The locksmith opened the car door, and when they reached in for the keys, they realized that they weren't in the ignition. This shocked shocked them both because the car was definitely on earlier when they realized that they were locked out. They went to walk back into the testing center to look in there, and after taking a couple steps, they heard the keys jingle in their pocket. The same pockets that they had checked before. Where did these keys come from? Because they definitely weren't in there before, and now they have to pay a locksmith $200 for no reason. Coming in at number 3, this one is another dog story and starts off with a woman who we'll call Anna having her bi-weekly phone call with her mom just to catch up and see what's going on. Anna's mom unfortunately had to inform her that Anna's sister's dog named Honey had passed away. Anna was obviously super upset at this loss and called her sister to check in after hearing the news. Anna had tons of questions about where they were planning to bury the dog, as well as how her sister's son was doing with the loss. Anna told her boyfriend how upset she was about the loss of the dog, as they had a really strong bond. Flash forward a couple months and Anna is heading home for Thanksgiving. Her sister was heading out of town to spend the holiday with her in-laws, so she left her pets at the parents' house so that they could be watched over. As Anna walks into her parents' home, she sees Honey, healthy as can be, just sitting in the living room. Anna was of course overjoyed, but asked her mom why she had told her that Honey died. Anna's mom was super confused and said that that conversation never happened. After leaving her parents' house, Anna asked her boyfriend about it, and he said he was super glad that she brought it up because he also remembered the conversation. Did they somehow enter a world where Honey was still alive? While this would be such an amazing surprise, it would also be unbelievably creepy. In our number 2 spot today, this story comes from a guy who loves cars but had a weird moment about 15 years ago that he just couldn't get off of his mind. When he was in his early 20s, he loved to speed in cars and just wanted to go fast. His friend had a car that he really wanted to drive, and one day it just turned out to be his lucky day and his friend finally gave in. He hopped in the driver's seat with his friend who owned the car in the passenger seat and another buddy in the back, and off they went. They went to an empty freeway around 3 a.m. and put the pedal to the metal. Once they hit around 135 miles per hour, they began to see a bunch of semi-trucks. There were basically 3 driving side by side, taking up all 3 of the lanes, and certainly not going as fast as our speed demon friend. He thought to himself that there was an on-ramp coming up and he would just use that as some extra room to pass, but unfortunately as he approached the on-ramp, another semi was entering the freeway and occupying that 4th lane. With all 4 semis lined up, he was approaching too fast with no time to brake, so he closed his eyes and prepared for the worst. But then nothing happened. He opened his eyes and the other guys in the car were just as confused as he was. Somehow they were now in front of all of the semis, but there was literally no room for them to have passed by. This was the end of his speeding career, as he was super spooked as to what possibly happened. Was this a real world glitch, or did he somehow enter a reality where he wasn't in an extremely dangerous and potentially fatal situation? And coming in at number 1. One day a guy gets a call from his neighbors asking him if he can help them move a mattress upstairs. They had a really great relationship with the neighbors, so he of course was willing to help. When he got there, they got the mattress all moved, and then the neighbors asked if he wouldn't mind helping with an armoire as well. No problem, he thought, as he began to help them move that one up the stairs as well. This is when things went awry. There were 11 stairs at the front. He was on the lower end carrying the armoire about 6 steps up, and his friend at the top lost a handle, and the whole thing came crashing down on him since he was at the bottom. He of course loses his balance and falls backwards towards the pavement, and this man actually remembers dying from this fall. The next thing he remembers though is waking up in his dining room with his phone ringing and his wife asking him if he's going to answer the phone. He's obviously super freaked out because he literally just died 2 seconds ago, but now he's here. When he answers the phone, it's his neighbor asking if he can help move a mattress up the stairs. He surprisingly goes over again to help, and when he gets there, he says that he can help with the mattress, but not with the armoire. His neighbor is shocked because he doesn't know how he would have possibly known about this. Did this guy have some sort of premonition, or did his death in one reality bring him into a different reality? Who knows, but I really hope he is taking advantage of his second chance at life.
Hello everyone in this universe, and maybe other universes, because it appears that some parallel universes are colliding with our own. Now don't believe me? Well, let's take a look at the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is when a group of people misremembers a historical event or person. Writer and researcher Fiona Broom coined the term over a decade ago when she created a website detailing her recollections of former South African President Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. Now, Nelson Mandela did not die in prison in the 1980s. After serving 27 years in prison, Mandela became president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999, and he died in 2013. Despite this, Fiona thought she remembered international news coverage of Mandela's death in the 1980s. She found out other people who shared these false memories as well, and it turns out there are so many other accounts of these so-called false memories resulting in the Mandela effect. Or maybe, just maybe, these aren't false memories but correct memories. What if the people whose memory is different is from a parallel universe and they merged with another universe, our universe? Now, the merge wouldn't be that noticeable, except for where some people remember the Monopoly man with a monocle, or it being the Berenstain Bears instead of the Berenstain Bears. Up next is time travel. Is time travel real? I think so. And if people can travel from different points of time, what's to stop them from traveling from parallel universes? Nothing. Right? Now, there have been plenty of cases of people claiming to see time travelers throughout history, not to mention there's whole articles online dedicated to celebrities who have past lookalikes that claim that they are time travelers. Now then, there's actually people out there who claim to be from the future. Now, though we can't really confirm their claims, one time traveler known only as Noah claims to be from the year 2030. One of the most shocking things that he claims is that us humans will be able to communicate with aliens. He said, "We've confirmed the existence of aliens, but they're not incredibly intelligent. Right now, the government has communication with them, but we don't know it. In the future, we are actually in contact with aliens that are just as smart as humans, although we have many more advancements over them," he said. Now, many people doubted him, so he took a polygraph test to prove that he was telling the truth, and he passed. So, is this legit? Moving on to cryptid sightings. Many people have claimed to and even have recorded proof of certain cryptids. But are these cryptids just from a parallel universe and sometimes they slip into our timeline? I think so, as some of the things people have claimed to capture and see are wild. First there's Bigfoot, then there's the Loch Ness Monster, the Jersey Devil, skinwalkers, and shapeshifters, you name it. Now, there's no way these mythical creatures are real in our universe, so what if they've just traveled over? What if in another universe we're at war with different Bigfoots and that's why they hide from us here? I mean, there are some trail cameras that capture some pretty out of this world looking creatures. Well, maybe it's just because they aren't even from this world, just some food for thought. Then there's the city in the sky. In 2015 in China, thousands of residents in two areas reported separately that they saw a huge city in the sky. Onlookers, some who are said to have captured the bizarre event, were said to be mesmerized as a towering city of skyscrapers appeared from the clouds. It's believed that a parallel universe opened up for a brief amount of time. Now, obviously, other theories also exist, like the phenomenon of it being called a mirage or a secret weapon to create holographic images. Now, the mystery has sent conspiracy theories into overdrive. Now, there were previous reports of a similar sighting in China in 2011. The YouTube channel Paranormal Crucible said in a video report, the footage captured by a local resident appears to show a huge city floating in the clouds. The apparition, which was witnessed by hundreds of shocking residents, only lasted a few minutes before completely disappearing. The channel speculated it could be the result of a Project Blue Beam test, as Project Blue Beam is a prolific conspiracy theory which believes that NASA will one day simulate an alien invasion on Earth or the second coming of Christ through holograms. My opinion though, I definitely think this is one of the portals opening up by accident. Moving on to deja vu. The phrase deja vu is borrowed from French and means already seen. Deja vu occurs when someone perceives that they have already experienced a situation before, and their body feels familiar with the experience and the situation, and it causes confusion. Now, approximately 2/3 of surveyed populations report experiencing deja vu at least one time in their lives, and it happens most often to people between 15 and 25 years of age. Now, we tend to experience the feeling less as we age, and it's said if you travel a lot or regularly remember your dreams, you may be more likely to experience deja vu than others. Now, someone who is tired or stressed may be prone to deja vu feelings too, and let me just say, I get deja vu very often and it is trippy. Now, there's not really any scientific scientific theory for this, but one theory has led many to believe that deja vu occurs when you do something in sync with your counterparts from another dimension. Now, I don't know, it's pretty cool to think about though in my opinion, and have you ever had deja vu before? Let me know in the comments. On to doppelganger. A doppelganger is a biologically unrelated lookalike or a double of a living person. You might have heard there are 7 other versions of you in the world, or at least 7 other people who look like you. Now, if this is true, these other people could actually be you from another universe, but they somehow made it to ours. I mean, you've all seen the photos of people who look like current celebrities, but they're from the 1800s, right? Or those times when you get mistaken for someone. Now, scientists actually did an experiment on this. The team collaborated with Canadian photographer Francois Brunel, who has been collecting and sharing portraits of lookalikes around the world since 1999 as a part of his I'm Not a Lookalike project. The experiment shows that the lookalike individuals share more genetic variants than randomly selected individuals. Now, the team also found that the resemblance between doppelgangers extended beyond their looks and genetics. Although the study was designed to examine their faces, the team used a very extensive questionnaire, which revealed that physical features such as weight and height also tended to be similar in doppelgangers, as did lifestyle traits such as smoking habits and educational attainment. Now that is just insane to me. Next up is the dream realm. Dreaming is weird, and we still don't really understand the science behind it, which means that it could happen for a multitude of reasons. Something that other people, and myself included, believe is that when we dream, we go into a dream realm, which is essentially another universe. Then it's thought whatever dreams we have, we actually experience, just in a parallel universe. Now, it doesn't stop there though, because it's thought if you had a dream that came true, it's because it happened to another version of you. Yeah, it's all kind of confusing and weird, but I definitely think our dreams have meaning to them, we just don't fully understand them yet. And lastly, we have shifting realities. During the first months of lockdown in 2020, people started to go a little stir crazy, and this caused them to learn how to shift realities. Now, their words, not mine. Reality shifting is a term that refers to the spiritual practice of transferring or shifting one's consciousness to an alternate reality and or the attempt to alter the reality one is experiencing and transcending one's physical confines to visit alternate universes. The techniques include hypnosis, meditation, biofeedback, binaural sounds, affirmations, and subliminal stimuli. So if you can shift to another universe, that means there are parallel universes, right? Now, I wish that I could shift to the reality where I am a multi-millionaire. Now, I've never tried shifting, and I don't know how much I believe it. Could it just be their imagination? I don't know, but some people swear by it.
Starting off this countdown, we have the wrong turn. So this is a real story reported by 4 university students. Their names were never disclosed to protect their identity. But apparently in May of 1972, they were on their way back from a Utah rodeo and headed to their dorm. On their way back, they decided to take a shortcut. But that was their first mistake. While traveling along this unknown road, the path suddenly turned into gravel, and then all of a sudden they hit a dead end. So they had to travel all the way back down the road that they just came. However, while doing so, they noticed that the path had changed. It didn't look like the same original path that they originally took. All of a sudden, they saw something glowing in the distance. They drove towards it and found themselves at a weird building with a neon sign. The neon sign was in a language that none of them recognized. When they pulled towards the building for help, these weird tall men came out towards them. They seemed confused and angry. One got close to the car and one of the girls screamed. The tall man didn't appear to be human, so they sped out of there. While driving away, they saw weird egg-shaped vehicles following them. They sped until the vehicles stopped following them. Finally, they somehow reached the road that they were originally on. To this day, they believe that they somehow traveled to another universe through that road. Isn't that creepy? Hit that thumbs up button if you agree. In our 9th spot, we have the lift ride and the disappearing store. Just recently, Reddit user NoBookkeeper3991 decided to take a lift to go to the dollar store. It wasn't too far from his place, and it wasn't complicated to get to. A couple minutes go by and he should have reached the store by now, but they couldn't find it. The store just randomly wasn't there anymore. In fact, the whole street looked different. Both the dude and the Lyft driver started to panic. Everything changed in front of them in a flash. It was super weird. So yeah, the guy didn't end up going to the dollar store that day. Apparently, they rode into a parallel universe or something. And of course, days later, the missing dollar store magically reappeared again. Moving on, at number 8, we have the disappearing professor. A well-known faculty member at the University of the Andes disappeared on campus without a trace. According to multiple witnesses, they saw the professor leave one of the university's buildings, cross the parking lot, and get into his car. Many people saw this happen. In fact, people were calling at him and waving to him as he got into his car. But his car sat there unmoving for a while. A couple of students actually approached the car to see what was going on and found the car empty. The professor was nowhere to be found. To this day, the professor has never returned. It's assumed that when he got into his car, he was transported to a different universe. Coming in at number 6, we have the campsite. A couple of years ago, a woman and her friends were out camping when they heard music coming from the forest. They followed the sound thinking that they were alone and came across a small stone cabin. The weirdest part? When they approached the cabin, they saw people dressed in 17th century fashion. One of the friends was fascinated and went over to the cabin to try and go inside. As she was about to enter, one of her friends pulled her away. As that happened, half of her body became paralyzed, the half that entered the cabin. It's believed that she partially entered another dimension, and that threw off her nervous system, which resulted in half of her body becoming paralyzed. In our 4th spot, we have the different family home. Back in the day, a woman named Carol Chase McElhenney decided to visit her old family town and area. But when she was driving down her old street, she couldn't find the old house that she grew up in. In fact, all the houses on the street looked completely different. She then decided to drive to the street where her grandmother used to live on. But when she got there, she found that the street was completely different as well. She then was driving through the town, noticing that almost everything was changed. Like the cemetery where her parents were buried wasn't there anymore. Or a strip of restaurants and hotels was now just a graffiti-covered area. She started feeling very uncomfortable and drove off. A few years later, Carol's father died and they went back to the cemetery to bury him with his parents. Surprisingly, the cemetery magically reappeared and everything about the town was back to normal. So she believes that during her other trip, she managed to visit her old town from a different dimension. In our 3rd spot, we have the birth certificate. Just recently, Reddit user Professional Echo 348 went to get a new birth certificate. They were at town hall when they saw that their mother's middle name was not right. It was written as Victoria, but her real middle name was Virginia. So she asked the clerk what was up with it. Even her last birth certificate had her mom's middle name as Virginia. Sadly, her mom passed away 17 years ago, so she couldn't just phone up her mom and ask her what was up. Plus, she even named her daughter's middle name after her mom's middle name. So she decided to dig into this some more. She was going through old files when she saw that her mother was once married to a man named Pierce, which again was wrong. His name was actually Pierre, not Pierce. So sometime in her life, she switched universes. One where her mother's middle name was Victoria and her stepfather's name was Pierce. Coming in at number 2, we have the different girlfriend. One day, a guy woke up only to find that he had been sleeping next to some random girl. He freaked out, and the girl, whose name was Laura, was all like, WTF, we've been dating for a couple of years now. How don't you remember? Stop fooling around, this isn't funny. Sure enough, his apartment was filled with framed photos of them together. What's weird is that wasn't his girlfriend. He was dating a girl named Maria, not Laura. So apparently, he went to bed with Maria and woke up beside a new girlfriend, Laura. So somehow he managed to switch universes in his sleep. That is insane. And does that count as cheating? Let me know in the comments below.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the cornfield. This story is about how someone believes that they may have somehow accidentally ended up in a universe similar to the one that they're used to, but this new one has just small changes that are beginning to freak them out a bit. They explain, quote, "So I live by a cornfield and have noticed small changes in my world, and the most major change I noticed just hours ago was that my entire house was on the other side of the street. I go home from school the same way every day. I end up going down my road, then turning right into my driveway. Today I went home the exact same way, but when I was getting ready to turn right, I noticed a cornfield. So I pull over to see what happened, then I turned around and noticed my house was on the completely opposite side of the road. road. I think my world is changing more than I first thought. Has something like this happened to anyone else? I mean, I have the same question now. Has this ever happened to any of you guys? I honestly wouldn't even know what to do. In our number 9 spot today, we have a reverse in time. This is a story that was posted to Reddit with the title Reverse in Time, which of course had me intrigued right off the bat. They start off by explaining that they have had 2 weird, sort of unexplainable things happen to them recently, and they explain that the first one happened when they gifted their boyfriend one of those chocolate oranges. They gave it to him because they remembered that his mom gave him one for Christmas every single year for their 8-year relationship, and she knew that he loved them. She saw an opportunity to get one and thought it might be a nice little surprise. Here's where the weird thing comes in though. When she gives it to him, he has no idea what it is. He claims that he had never seen one nor had one of these chocolate oranges before and was completely bewildered, and then when he tried it, he hated it. Okay, definitely a little suspicious, but maybe they just got something mixed up. Then they go on to tell this story. Quote, I had just gotten out of the grocery store and was pushing my cart towards my car when all of a sudden I looked down and the cart was gone. I looked around and I wasn't even in the store parking lot anymore. I was in a parking lot of an apartment complex that my best friend moved out of years ago. The other thing that was freaky was my car keys were completely different. To be exact, they were the keys to my car that I had in 2015. I looked around panicked and actually saw my old car. I had a rubber duck on the dashboard of that car and the same duck was there. I remember feeling my stomach drop and an overwhelming feeling of dread at this realization. This was a horrible time in my life and I would do anything to not have to relive it. Then my ears started ringing and my head started hurting like a migraine was coming on, so I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was back in the grocery store parking lot with the correct keys and my current car. I can't explain this and I'm still confused by this. I'm confused by this and I didn't even have to live it. I can't even imagine. In our number 8 spot today, we have the cudi effect. This is one story that might be a parallel universe story, or maybe it's one sign of the Mandela effect. I'm wondering if anyone else shares this same memory with this person, so once you hear the story, let us know down below in the comments. We all know how often it happens that someone will start circulating a fake death claim about a celebrity on the internet. It happens all of the time for some morbid reason. The storyteller explains that they know this and assure all of us that this is not the case in their situation. They say that they remember the artist Kid Cudi passing away sometime in 2018 or 2019. They say that they can remember seeing it on the news and it being shared on social media and everyone was really upset. So flash forward to just a couple days ago and they hear their sister talking about the new Kanye West and Kid Cudi drama that has been going on, and they say it's weird that Kanye would have beef with Cudi since he died. This is when they go on to Google it and realize now that they can't find any news on Kid Cudi passing away, and that is of course because whatever timeline we're in, that never happened. It would definitely be a conflicting feeling to have this clear memory that you swear is real, but everything around you is telling you it's not. In our number 7 spot today, we have the missing typewriter. This story comes from Reddit and they write, quote, as a kid I remember having a typewriter and I remember I used to love typing nonsense on it, pretend files and telegrams. A few years ago I bought a typewriter from eBay and I asked my mom about that typewriter and she had no idea what I was talking about. I asked my dad and he had no idea. I asked my cousins who I remember using it with and they had no idea. I remember so well it's frightening. That was years ago. I still don't understand. I also remember a few other things like having a desk and chair in my bedroom. Also no one remembers that, and there are many pictures of me in my room as a kid, yet none exist of these little memories I have. Is it possible I passed through a parallel universe after my childhood? Does anyone else have childhood memories that never happened? Childhood items that never existed? That's a great question. I had a teddy bear called Ears that my dog destroyed one year, but if I call my dad and find out that he never existed, I would be pretty confused. It's a small thing, but I can totally understand why this would be a very weird feeling. In our number 6 spot today, we have an alternate world. This story starts off with them explaining that ever since they were a teenager, they dreamed of this alternate life they have where they go to university and work in the city. It started around age 16 and they are now 25. They say that this other life is really detailed, like it basically is like living an entirely other life. They then go on to write, quote, last night I was feeling sick and in return had one of the most vivid dreams I had in a long time. I met someone and developed a deep relationship that felt incredibly emotional and real. Luckily I woke up right when I was trying to navigate Google Maps to drive to a park, so I remember the street we were on. It was called Dutch Island Road. Never heard of it in real life, so I decided to look it up. The only thing that popped up was a rural area in Rhode Island. It wasn't exactly the same layout of roads I remembered on the map, but the nature and area look eerily similar to what I saw while driving. I started looking around the area, clicking different locations, and started to freak out at how everything looks just like in my dream. Mind you, I've never been to Rhode Island, but the weirdest part is that specific buildings in the Rhode Island University and Warwick are the ones I see in my dream all the time. What? How could they have so accurately dreamed of something they had never seen in real life? They go on to say, quote, "I've always thought my dreams were a glimpse of living in an alternate universe, and I feel like this detail solidifies the potential of it being a reality." In our number 5 spot today, we have New Year, New World. This story is one that starts off with a bang. Quite literally. It starts off on New Year's Eve 2020 when the storyteller was about to leave work and fell down a flight of stairs. They broke their nose when it hit the concrete stair, and despite this obviously terrible injury, they explained that they think they actually died in their old universe and somehow transferred over into this one where they were able to survive their injuries. They say they've started to notice slight changes, like the mask they were wearing when the fall occurred. They remember being filled and basically ruined with blood from their injury, but suddenly they find this mask in their bag perfectly clean with no evidence of the fall. Also, the spot where the fall occurred clearly hadn't been cleaned due to the presence of other dirt and debris, but following the incident, there was no blood there either. This is especially weird considering the steps were concrete, so you think that there would be some sort of evidence. They go on to write about how they then began to notice small changes in those around them, with the biggest one being in reference to their mom. When they were a child, they remember their mother having breast cancer and thankfully being able to overcome it. After the fall, and when they believed they transferred universes, they were speaking to their mother on the phone and somehow got on the topic when their mother seemed really confused and explained that she had never had cancer or really anything of the sort. They remember it so well they even remember passing notes about it to their friends in class and worrying about it for months. They were of course happy to hear that their mother's healthy, but how could they possibly have this memory too? It's definitely all very strange. In our number 4 spot today, we have Somehow. This story comes from Reddit, and they quickly start off by explaining that somehow, suddenly, they don't know when or how it happened, but they just woke up in a universe that wasn't their own. They have a few examples of how they know this. Some are a little more bizarre than others, but they're all examples nonetheless. So basically they start by explaining that a statue in their town isn't where they remember it being. The next example is that they remember harvest mites or berry bugs, and they remember and have actually had multiple occasions of them burying themselves into their skin, but in our timeline or universe, that isn't what those bugs do. Those were the more out there reasons, but the others consist of memories they have of childhood that have never happened, a movie they used to watch a bunch of times no longer existing anymore, and now they are suddenly friends and acquaintances with a bunch of people they'd never even met before. Certain things about their wife are different, including the ring she wears, and some foods are tasting different to them. It seems as though one day they woke up in a slightly altered universe from the one they were living in before. In our number 3 spot today, we have The Cemetery. This story comes from Reddit, and it was posted with the title, quote, "I think my kids and I may have traveled to an alternate universe." They write about how a couple months ago they and their kids were walking through and around a cemetery. Their children are 13 and 9, and during their little walk they ended up heading through the entire cemetery, and they came across a small beautiful mausoleum. They remember it so well that they even noted how the last person to be placed within the mausoleum happened about 50 years prior. So then, a few weeks later, they were walking through the cemetery again with their kids, but this time they brought their mom as well. I know, I'm also questioning why this family likes to take strolls through a cemetery, but they do say that they do this to ground them. Anyway, the kids began to tell their grandmother about the mausoleum they saw last time and asked if they could show her and visit it again. But when they go and try and find the mausoleum, it isn't anywhere. They search for at least half an hour, and with no luck, they ask someone who helps tend to the area, and he says that no such thing exists. They say that the cemetery is small enough that there should be no issue locating it, but it just doesn't seem to exist at all anymore. Both she and her kids remember what it looked like so clearly, so how could it have just disappeared? Now they've got me thinking that this mausoleum was somehow a portal to another reality. In our number 2 spot today, we have The Eclipse. This story originally took place in 2017 during the eclipse. The storyteller is located in Virginia, and based on that, they wouldn't get to experience the total eclipse, but would see some of it. They go on to write, quote, "I had just gotten off of work and entered my apartment. The time was 2:15 p.m. and the eclipse wouldn't happen for another half hour. I decided to change my clothes and take a quick nap. I set an alarm clock for 20 minutes and drifted off to sleep. I also want to note that I was living on my own. When I woke up, it felt like at least an hour had passed. I was really disappointed because I wanted to experience the eclipse. I looked at the time on my phone and no time had passed. It was 2:20 p.m. I thought I'd stay awake instead and sit on my porch, but when I had gotten out and sat down, I noticed it was dead quiet. Nothing. I heard no cars, I saw no neighbors, I didn't see a single bird. I wasn't asleep. I tested it. I left my apartment and my complex and nothing. I walked to the stores across from me and they were all closed. There was no wind rustling through the leaves on the trees. I could not even find an ant. I tried to call people on my contact list and everything went to voicemail. It was as though every living being stopped existing. Throughout my adventure, the eclipse darkened and lightened the sky. I went back home, I sat on my couch, the rest of the day continued. I went to sleep that night. When I woke up, it was 3 p.m. on the same day. The eclipse had just ended. I missed my alarm. It was like it never happened. I've been waiting to tell this story for the longest. I have no idea where I was, but that place was just as real as this dimension. I don't know where they went, but they swear it wasn't of this earth anymore. Whether it was another planet, another dimension, or something else entirely, I'll never know. Maybe it was just a really strange and vivid dream, but at this point, who knows for sure. In our number 1 spot today, we have 3 years. This is a story that the person telling it explained is something that has made them feel as if they are going crazy for the last 3 years, but once they began to read other stories of similar experiences, they are beginning to think it's a sign that they are in a parallel universe to the one that they grew up in. They say that for 3 years they've been trapped in a body that is not their own. They say, quote, "I am in my body, but just not the size I was. I weighed 540 pounds and was 5'6", but now I'm 260 pounds and 5'10". Not a big difference in height, but the weight is noticeable. I did not have a family, but now I have many children and a grandchild. This took some time getting used to. I never served in the military, but in this life I served for 4 years and went to college on a GI Bill. Zero memories of this time in my life, but I did go to the same school on a scholarship in my life." They go on to say that they've just been basically faking it for the last few years and aren't sure where the real and the fake ends. They always just feel a little out of step with this world and they don't quite feel comfortable in their own skin. They've tried to get back into their other life, but just can't seem to figure out how.
Starting off this countdown, we have the parallel wedding. This story was posted on Reddit by the user Parallel Alt Girl, who went to a wedding in a parallel universe. So back in the day, she attended her aunt's wedding. The wedding was big and the theme of the wedding was dark blue. So all the bridesmaids were wearing blue dresses, and so was she. After the wedding, she took a little nap before the reception. But when she woke up, she was no longer in a blue dress. She was in a light orange one. So was everyone else. She didn't know how that was even possible. But even looking back at the wedding photos, she was photographed attending the wedding in an orange dress, along with all the other bridesmaids. So now she believes that she somehow woke up in another universe, one where everyone wore orange instead of blue to the wedding. In our 9th spot, we have the swapped selves. This story was posted on Reddit by the user someoneelse777. She believes that she swapped places with her parallel universe self. So story goes that she was out for a hike one day with her boyfriend. They were nearing the end of the hike when her boyfriend decided to climb a big rock formation. But she was too tired, so she continued to walk down the path to meet him at the other end. However, while walking, she got a bad feeling, thinking that something bad happened to her boyfriend. Then all of a sudden, she was someone else. She went from thinking, what if my boyfriend gets hurt? I should rescue him, to I came here alone, who am I rescuing? So in one universe, she was out hiking with her boyfriend. In the other, she was out hiking alone. When she switched places, she noticed that her other self was a bit different. She was a bit taller, fitter, and felt more confident. She was also carrying a tent and supplies for a solo journey. Her boyfriend was not with her. Like what? That would freak me out. Just all of a sudden like, and you're someone else? But like, yourself, but then someone else? I don't know. Coming in at number 8, we have the castle. Posted on Reddit by the user John30859, he shared his experience visiting a parallel universe. But this one was actually quite magical. So story goes that John and his cousin were outside on the porch when 2 teenagers approached them and asked them if they wanted to see a castle. I mean, that has stranger danger written all over it. But the 2 boys were young and naive, so they followed them along a path in the woods. Little while later, they saw a huge, beautiful castle in the distance. They got so excited that they ran home to show their parents. But when they arrived home, his mom got mad and told them to stay inside for the rest of the night. Here's the thing. He claims that his mom is very strict. She's always checking in on them when they're playing outside, so she would have noticed if they left. On top of that, in the area he lives in, there are no castles or churches or anything else that could have been mistaken for a castle. But the boys both vividly remember seeing the castle, even now at 25 years old. So what happened? Well, other people replied to his post offering him two explanations. One is that they were taken to Fairy, basically a parallel dimension that can only be reached by doors in hills, under lakes and wells, through hedges, etc. The next is that the teenagers were actually aliens in disguise that brought them into another dimension. Either way, they somehow got transported into a world that has a giant castle. Moving on at number 7, we have the third floor. This next story was posted on Reddit by the user FeiFei775. Back in 2015, he went to the hospital to visit his dad, who was a patient there. After spending some time with him, he left with his friend to go get some snacks. So they hopped on the elevator and went to the third floor where all the food was. But when the doors opened, they found that the whole area was completely deserted. The lights were flickering and the floor was trashed. Scared, they headed on back to the 5th floor where his dad's room was. Fast forward to a week later, they are back at the hospital. And turns out that his dad was, and had always been, on the 3rd floor, which was now cleaned up and in use. So he's convinced that he somehow took an elevator to a different universe. Coming in at number 6, we have jumping universes. So this story was posted on Reddit a month ago, but the user that posted the story deleted their account. I wonder why. Maybe they ended up in a different universe. Alright, so this individual wrote that every time they wake up from a sleep, they believe that they are in a different universe. The differences in each universe are small, but still you know that something is not quite right. Some people will act differently from day to day, or a location of objects will move ever so slightly. So they believe that every day they end up in a different universe. And a lot of people commented on this post claiming that they too have had similar experiences, where they fall asleep and then wake up and they're in a different universe. My only question is, how many universes are out there? Coming in at number 4, we have the breakfast place. Posted on Reddit by the user TexasKSMO, she shares a story about the time her and her husband visited a restaurant in a parallel universe. So to begin, the couple bought a little country house which they go to on the weekends. One weekend while traveling there, they decided to stop and have breakfast at a restaurant they had never seen before. They entered and a man in a cowboy hat said, "You can just seat yourself." I feel like that's what he sounded like if he had a cowboy hat on, so. They ended up having a nice meal and wanted to return a couple weeks later. However, when they went back to try and find the same restaurant, it was gone. Instead, in place of the restaurant was an old boarded up abandoned building. The building looked the same, but was completely deserted. Dun, dun, dun. I wonder how food tastes though in another universe. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. Maybe they have new food that we don't have in this universe. Who knows? In our third spot, we have the workday. This story was posted 4 years ago on Reddit, but sadly the account is now deleted, so I can't give them credit. So according to this post, it was September 11th, 2015, and the guy was headed to his job of 5 years. But when he got there, he said that something fell off. In fact, he saw employees that he had never even seen before. He ended up striking a conversation with one of them and mentioned how it was September 11th and how it was sad what happened on that day. But the employee had no clue what he was talking about. The guy explained it, but the employee was all like, "What attacks? That never happened." Then on his way home, he was listening to the radio and it mentioned Howard Dean as president. Obviously, this freaked the guy out, so as soon as he got home, he decided to just lay down and relax. He ended up falling asleep, and when he woke up, he was back in his normal universe. Honestly, I think it would be super scary to get trapped in a universe that isn't yours. Like, you'd be telling stories and people would be like, "What are you talking about, you little crazy person?" Like, no one would believe you. You'd be by yourself. Sad. Coming in at number 2, we have the assignment. 3 Acid Nirvana on Reddit shared his experience about traveling to another universe, where something freaky happened to him at school. So in one of his courses, his teacher gave the class a massive research assignment. For the assignment, they had to use resources from a list the teacher supplied them with. So he ended up using this one book in the library to help him write the paper. About a week before the paper was due, he needed to go cite something from the book, but he already returned it to the library. So he went to the library and asked to get the book. Not only did the library not carry the book, but there was no such book ever written. Which is freaky, because how could he write a whole paper on a topic that he didn't know without any sources? So he must have traveled to a different universe, one where that book doesn't exist. And in our number 1 spot, we have Denny's. Ever wonder what food is like in an alternate universe? Well, they still got Denny's, I can tell you that. But it goes by another name there, Penny's. Yep. Reddit user is_emo posted a story about the time he ended up going to a place called Penny's, which was identical to Denny's. From the building to the food and the menu, everything was the same. Except it was called Penny's. He even asked his parents about it since he had been to that restaurant in that same location multiple times, but they said it has always been called Penny's. A couple weeks later, when passing by the restaurant, he noticed the sign "Turn back to Denny's." He asked his parents again and they said they have never even heard about Penny's. What's going on? Like, that would drive me insane. Does this happen to other restaurants too in other dimensions? Like, is Chick-fil-A called Flick-Chile? Thought-provoking question. Moving on at number 9, we have the lost friend. Posted on Reddit by Gotta Yeet, she is part of a friend group of 5. But recently, one of the friends in the group felt like someone was missing. She felt like they were always a friend group of 6. But she can't figure out who it is that's missing. So it's believed that that friend switched universes and is now in one where she has a group of 5 friends instead of 6. In our 8th spot, we have the different dog. So each universe is slightly different. Some buildings might disappear, maybe you live on a different street, or you're taller, or people around you behave a bit differently. While for the user Mr. Stuffed Baconator, he is now living in a universe where his uncle's dog is completely different. So a couple of years ago, he went back to Brazil to visit his uncle's dog for the first time. The dog's name is Sebastian and he is a white Samoyed. Then just last year, he went back to Brazil and his uncle's dog is now a huge Labrador. Still named Sebastian though, just a completely different breed. He asked his aunt and uncle what happened to their old dog, but obviously they had no clue what they were talking about. That was the only dog they ever had. In our 7th spot, we have the swap. This next Reddit user keeps switching between universes. He notices that every day something changes. For example, items in his room keep disappearing, his shower head turned from gray to black, and street signs keep changing around him. One day the street sign will be brand new. The next day it will be rusty, covered in vines. This has led him to believe that every day he wakes up in a new universe, one that is slightly different. Honestly, that would drive me insane. But hey, if I ever lose an object, I now know it's because I'm in a different universe, one where I never owned that object to begin with. Making our way down the list at number 6, we have the new items. Reddit user Blood of Loki shared a story about the time he was recovering in the hospital after a near-death experience. When he was finally well enough to go home, the hospital gave him the items he had come to the hospital with. These items were a green coat and a hat, but he has no memory of owning these items in the first place. But inside of the jacket was his personal items, so it's not like the hospital just gave him the wrong stuff. So he believes that sometime during his hospital stay, he switched to a different universe. One where he entered the hospital with that coat and hat. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the changes. Like I mentioned before, it would drive me insane if I woke up and things around me just changed. Well, this is what happened to the Reddit user Derizzle. So one night he went to bed on his white and black bed sheets, but when he woke up the next morning, his sheets were black and red. He also found that his laptop was covered in stickers, although he always thought putting stickers on electronics was stupid since it ruins the look of them. But there he was, different sheets and a different laptop. He asked his mom about the sheets, seeing if she somehow changed them, but she had no clue what he was talking about. Also, the night before, he got into a fight with his family and he woke up expecting that they would still be mad at him. But they weren't at all. It's like the fight never happened. So he believes that overnight he traveled to another universe. Meaning that his other self got sent to the universe where his family is mad at him. Like, imagine waking up and not knowing why everyone is upset with you. That would just add more fuel to the fire. Like, the parents would be like, oh, stop pretending like you don't know. Yikes, I bet that was a rough morning for that version of himself. In our 4th spot, we have the wives. This next story is pretty eerie, but also really cool. So posted by the Reddit user AJKnox09, he shared the time he swapped places with his other self. So first, it's important to note that his wife-to-be passed away when he was 20. Down the line, he got married to another woman who he's been with for 20 years, and they have 2 daughters together. So one day they were all at a restaurant when all of a sudden he became very dizzy. He even grabbed the table to brace himself. When he turned to look at his wife, he saw that it wasn't his current wife. No, in her place was his 20-year-old wife-to-be and their daughter, who looked just like her. Then he was overcome with a dizzy sensation again, and when it stopped, he was back with his current wife. Which means that in another reality, his wife-to-be never passed away, and they went on to have a life together. Which also means he's technically married to 2 different women at the same time. Like, is that considered cheating if your other self has a different partner? In our 3rd spot, we have Nair. Reddit user Ganj_316 claims that he is from a parallel universe where Earth is called Nair. Yep, he said that back on Nair, people started disappearing all over the world without a trace. Then one day he did too, and he showed up on Earth. He then reached out over Reddit to see if anyone else on there was from Nair as well. Apparently, a lot of things are different back on Nair. His planet is smaller, they have different countries, and they don't eat animals. Now he just wants to find a way to get back home.